What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Philly Faithful podcast. It is Thursday, October the 3rd, and we are going to have a pretty short show today. Not much going on in the land of the Phillies, as we still do not know who the Phillies will be facing in the National League Divisional Series round, but we will find out who that will be tonight. My name is Troy Brock. I'll be your host on this journey. You can find me on socials at Troy B Baseball. You can follow the show on socials at Philly Faith Pod. Faith spelled just like it is on the podcast. Make sure you like, follow, rate, subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating on Spotify so this podcast can be shown to more Phillies fans just like you. But we're going to jump on into it and recap last night's game. The only game that has any Philadelphia Phillies implications going on right now, and that is the Mets and Brewers, as the winner of this series goes on to face the Phillies in the National League Divisional Series. The Brewers win last night's game 5-3. They went 11 for 32. They drew no walks. 11 for 32, no walks. Jackson Chourio was their player of the game by far. He hit 2 home runs. He had a really nice game, and he's a rookie. He's doing this in the postseason as a rookie. So a really good season for Jackson Chourio. He seems like he might be the real deal and something that the Major League Baseball and the Phillies will have to worry about for years to come. The Brewers did go 0 for 3 with runners in scoring position. That's been a theme for this series for both teams, as both teams have really struggled to hit with runners in scoring position, as you'll see here in just a little bit when we get to how the Mets did, which we'll go ahead and jump into that. The Mets bats were silent again. Hitting has been an issue for the Mets in this series. They went 8 for 33. If you remember on the game before last night was Wednesday, so that game would have been Tuesday, because that's how a week works. These are the days of the week. Mets went 8 for 33 last night. Tuesday night, they had 5 walks. Last night, they had 4 walks. So they have been doing really well at making pitchers work and getting on base and drawing walks. They just haven't been able to really capitalize on that. At least they weren't last night as well as they did on Tuesday night. No extra base hits for the Mets last night by anyone across the board. And that is surprising when you consider their lineup is pretty much built to get extra base hits with Pete Alonso, Starling Marte, Jesse Winker. I'm not sure if he started last night, actually. Probably should have looked that up, but I didn't. But no extra base hits for the Mets last night. And they only went 2 for 11 with runners in scoring position. 2 for 11. That's really bad. I mean, that's probably worse than 0 for 3. 0 for 3, you only have 3 opportunities. 2 for 11, you have 11, and you only get a hit in 2 of them. That's pretty bad. But that's the Mets. Deciding game of that series is tonight, and that is the only wild card game left. The 3 other wild card series all ended last night. All of the other 3 were sweeps. So the Padres swept the Braves, the Detroit Tigers swept the Houston Astros, and the Kansas City Royals swept the Baltimore Orioles. So the 2 American League division winners that were in the wild card round are both – no, I'm sorry. The Baltimore Orioles were not a division winner. The American League division winner that was in the wild card round is out, and the National League division winner could be out later on this evening, and it is the only game, so the whole world will be watching to see if the Phillies will be facing the Mets or the Brewers. And the first game of the National League Division Series will be on Saturday, and we do know who will be starting that game for the Phillies. May not come as much of a surprise to you or anyone else in the baseball world, but starting game 1 of the National League Divisional Series for the Phillies will be, drumroll please, Zach Wheeler. Go ahead and pick your jaws up off the floor on that one. I know everyone's surprised. Zach Wheeler starting game 1 for the Phillies in the National League Divisional Series. As we've already talked about, Zach, on the first episode of this show, when I gave out the regular season awards for the team, Zach Wheeler is in contention for the National League Cy Young. Chris Sale did wind up not pitching in the last game of the season for the Braves. So he is once somewhere between 175 and 178 innings pitched, where Zach Wheeler has 200 innings pitched. That is something that voters look at. However, Chris Sale did win the National League Triple Crown. So the Cy Young is probably going to Chris Sale just because he won the National League Triple Crown. If it weren't for that, Zach Wheeler would hands down be the National League Cy Young, because Zach Wheeler had the better longevity, pitched more innings, whether that be Chris Sale's fault or not, or just the way the Braves used him. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. And Zach Wheeler pitched 200 innings. Chris Sale didn't. Whoop-de-doo. All right. Wheeler versus the Mets this season. He held the Mets to a 259, 286, 407 batting line. That's a 693 OPS for the Mets against Wheeler. Only one start for Wheeler against the Mets this season, which is surprising. In 13 games, they only faced him once. 2.57 ERA for Wheeler in that game, a 1.143 whip. He struck out 8 batters, and that came in 7 innings. So he did go 7 innings in his one start against the Mets, something that Wheeler did a lot of this season, something that the Phillies starting pitchers as a unit did a lot of this season, was going 7 or more innings, and it really was beneficial for the Phillies, and it's going to be proved beneficial for the Phillies bullpen in the postseason, because their bullpen is a lot less taxed than some of these other teams' bullpens, where they did not have starters go 7 innings on a pretty regular basis. Against the Brewers this season, Zach Wheeler held them to a .192, .240, .298 triple slash line. That's a .538 OPS. And that came in 2 starts, which again is surprising that they faced him twice in 6 games and the Mets only faced him once in 13 games. But that's the way it shook out. He has a 1.29 ERA on the year against the Brewers, a 0.857 whip, 12 strikeouts in 14 innings. So he pitched really well against both teams. The 2.57 ERA against the Mets, that's what he finished the year with. Across the board, he had a 2.57 ERA. So that's pretty solid stuff there from Zach Wheeler, and honestly, it's about what you would expect from the team ace. He is the best pitcher on the staff. It's not surprising that he's going to be starting game 1 of the National League Divisional Series. That is what everybody expected, especially with the long break in between the regular season and the National League Division Series. The Phillies are able to set their rotation the way that they want, and the way that they want is Zach Wheeler going game 1, give them the best opportunity to get out in front with a 1-0 series lead on the opening day of the 5-game series. Divisional series is 5 games. It's quick. You got to get your 3 wins in 5 games if you want to move on. And like I've said time and time again, and the 2 games in the wild card series between these 2 teams have continued to cement this. I have no worries whatsoever of either team against the Philadelphia Phillies in the divisional series. Both teams are really not made for the playoffs. They just got in on a wing and a prayer, and whichever team makes it to the National League Division Series after tonight's game, that's about as far as they're going to make it, because the Phillies are, again, the best team in baseball. They have the best roster in baseball. They have the best pitching rotation in baseball. They have the best lineup in baseball. The bullpen might not be the best in baseball, but it is one of the best in baseball. And the Brewers nor the Mets can stack up with the Phillies on paper. On paper, the Phillies are the best team in baseball. The Brewers are the division winner from a weak division. I actually did the math last night, and the Brewers had a pretty good record in division. And while they did have a good record out of division, it was not as good as their record in division. And it helped them win their National League Central. And if they were in a different division, they would not have won that division. If they were in the East, they obviously would not have won because the Phillies finished the season with 95 or 96 wins. And if they were in the West, they would not have won because the Dodgers finished the season with 98 wins. I think the Brewers would have came in third in the West because I'm pretty sure the Padres have more wins than what the Brewers would have had. So the Brewers went 32-20 in division this year, a 615 win percentage over 162 games. That's 99 wins with that win percentage. Against opponents outside of the division, they went 61-49, which is a 555 win percentage. Still solid, not great, still solid. I will give them that. And that equates to 90 wins over 162 games, which might not get them in the playoff. Oh, it would get them a wild card spot. They would have a wild card spot. The Mets would be the odd team out. And if the Brewers had 90 wins and someone else won the National League Central Division. So I have no qualms about the Phillies facing either team in the divisional series. It's going to be a cakewalk. It's at this point, it's an obligation for the Phillies to move on and see if they're facing the Dodgers or the Padres in the National League Championship Series. And with the way the Padres have played, it's probably going to be the Padres because the Dodgers are another team who have a very, very, very shallow lineup, and they have a very, very, very shallow pitching rotation, which is essentially Jack Flaherty and the boys. I mean, you have Walker Buehler in there, but he has not been good this season, and that's really it. Yamamoto is unproven in the playoffs. This was his first season in Major League Baseball, and he had a pretty good season. It was shortened a good bit due to injury, as well as most of the Dodgers season was. But if the Dodgers are the team to move on to the National League Championship Series, then you need to start go ahead and purchasing your World Series tickets to go see the Phillies in the World Series against whoever that may be. And the Padres are the only team left in the playoffs that can really come close to stacking up with the Phillies in the National League. And I texted a friend of mine this last night. Whether it is the Phillies or it is another team, the World Series champion for 2024 resides in the National League. The American League with the Royals, Tigers, Yankees, and Guardians, none of those teams can match up with really any of the teams in the National League. It's kind of a crazy weak American League side of the bracket. And it's going to be fun down the stretch, especially if you're a Phillies fan. It is going to be very fun. And if you're listening to this, then you sure are a Phillies fan. And if you are listening to this, make sure you like, follow, rate, subscribe, give us that 5-star rating on Spotify so more Phillies fans just like you can be given this podcast. Check out me on socials at Troy P Baseball. You can find my writings over on Sports Illustrated. Follow the pod on socials at Philly Faith Pod, faith spelt just like it is on the podcast. That's going to be it. It's a short show today. We will be back tomorrow when we officially know who the Phillies will be facing in the National League Division Series. And until that time, I've been Troy. You've been awesome. Peace, love, and rock and roll. I'm out. Bye.